Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cooking from Quarantine. Today's a very special episode, one that is near and dear to my heart. We are making my chicken soup. This is a recipe that has been passed down and modified through the generations in my family, from my grandmother to my mother, who really made some big improvements to it. Bubby was not the greatest cook, but my mother was a really good cook, and so she then passed the recipe down to me. So it's a very matriarchal, fuck the patriarchy kind of recipe. So we need a few things to get started with this recipe, and I should say that we're making a soup, but what we're actually making first is our stock. I make a soup and a stock at the same time, and the way I can do that is that this is the most old school recipe that I cook. This is like super shtetl time. This is how they did it in the old country. So you'll see later when we separate out pieces from this soup that first we have flavored a stock, but then also we have made pieces of a soup to immediately serve with it. So think of it first as building a stock, and what you're going to need is your most enormous stock pot. Mine, I know, looks comically huge. My mother's is bigger, and I wish mine were bigger, honestly, because I love making lots of stock. It keeps in the freezer terrifically, and it can keep for 6 months, so there's no reason not to go big when you're making stock. So you need an enormous stock pot filled halfway with water and on as high a heat as you can to get it boiling. I like to start it boiling while I'm prepping all of my veggies and things like that, because it takes a long time for that much water to boil. 3 chickens cut completely in half. See, these used to be 1 chicken, so this is 3 chickens that I did with all the fat still on. Take the giblets out, throw them away. So it's 3 chickens. My mom's uses 2 chickens. I think my bubby's used 1 chicken. I have a feeling a lot of this has to do with just the size of the cookware that we had. Mine uses 3 chickens because I also like to get a second boil out of it, which I'll also talk about later when we go to separate out everything. We need celery. This is 1 bunch of celery plus the dregs of another celery I had in the fridge. We're just going to toss it in. Baby carrots. The reason we want baby carrots is because of the soup part of this. Yes, we want carrots to flavor the stock, but when I serve it as soup, we also want these guys to have been cooked in it so that everybody gets a little bit of carrot in their soup. So you want them small, but I also had a couple of carrots left over in the fridge that I chopped up, and we're going to be tossing in. Turnips and parsnips. This guy is a parsnip, and this guy was a turnip. Sometimes these are humongous, and so you only need 2. Sometimes they're really small like this, and so you need 5. It just kind of depends on what the produce looks like the day that you're putting all of these ingredients together. Same thing with your turnips. Sometimes they're huge and you need 2, and you have to almost slice them into eighths, and sometimes they're tiny, and so I used 4 of them. I quartered all of these. You don't have to take any of these pieces off. All you have to do is just make sure they're washed. You don't have to get anything out of here. Again, that's the beauty of making stock. Then I used 3 Spanish onions that I've quartered. Keep the skins on. We're going to be separating out our soup, and it adds flavor to the stock. You keep everything on. It's super easy. Vidalia onions would be better in this soup. They're sweeter. Those are the Vidalia onions. These are Spanish onions. Vidalia onions are wider, squatter, but they look very similar to this. It would be better, but my grocery store didn't have it, so we're using Spanish onions. Usually I use 1 bulb of garlic, just cut in half on the equator of the garlic. Again, leave all the skin on. We're throwing it all in. But since this guy was so small, I'm using 2. My mother doesn't use any garlic in her stock. So, leeks. Leeks are very important to this recipe. It's the thing I usually leave out when I give this recipe to other people so that their soup doesn't come out as good as mine. Sometimes you use 3 leeks because they're long and skinny. Sometimes you use 2 leeks because they're like thick motherfuckers. I'm gonna actually show you how to cut down a leek correctly because that's the one part of this recipe that you could fuck up pretty badly. In addition to that, we have aromatics. Dill. I use a lot of dill in my recipe. The smell of it is very, very smelling of home to me. It was my grandfather's favorite herb after he passed away. Whenever I smelled dill, I kind of got a little emotional, sometimes a lot emotional. So I'm actually using 2 bunches of dill. Dill is a criminally underused herb, I feel, in this country. But I went to Denmark about a year or so ago, and they use dill in a lot of things there. Scandinavian cooking in general. It's a very bright herb. It's like if celery went on vacation to Greece, and like decided to really be a slut about it. Like dill is it's just a fabulously aromatic herb. But so they use a lot of it in Scandinavian cooking. I love it. Happens to go really well with fish, but we're doing it with chicken. Italian flat leaf parsley I use again just to flavor the stock, not so much for the soup aspect of it. My mother does not use parsley in her rendition. Lots of kosher salt and fresh cracked black pepper. A note about all of these ingredients: some times of year things aren't so flavorful, and your onions, like, you can't even smell them when you cut them open. The carrots aren't particularly sweet. The sweet parts of celery, which are the inside stalks, not the outside stalks, these guys, this is where like the real celery smell comes from. So good. Sometimes aren't so sweet. Sometimes your chickens aren't so sweet. If that's the case, if you're cooking this kind of like when root veggies aren't particularly in season, throw a little bit of bouillon into your soup. Don't tell anybody about it, but like, you get a pass because you just want to kick up the ingredients and you want to make everything sing. And so if you toss in a little bit of bouillon, nobody knows and everybody will think it's delicious. So give yourself a break. Okay, so first we're going to toss the chickens in. They need the longest amount of time to cook, and since they displace so much water in the pot, we need to put them in first to make sure we have room for the rest of what we're putting in, because it's possible we're going to have to take some water off the top of our pot. So, okay, so we're going to take our 3 halved chickens, and you should really invest in a pair of cooking shears for projects like this. I mean, a scissor might not really cut it. Cut it. And so cooking shears are specifically made, it's like as if 2 chef's knives got together and decided to have like a little rendezvous and created a scissor. So we're putting the 3 chickens into our stock pot. And actually that does leave quite a bit of room left over in the top to put the rest of our veggies, so I don't think we're going to have to take any water out of there, but you know, we'll play it as we go. Let's toss in our celery, and you don't have to finely chop anything. I took my stalks of celery and cut them into thirds and just removed the very top bits and the bottom root part. Speaking of roots, let's get our root veggies going in here. I'm trying to put all of the heaviest ingredients in first, again, because I want to see how much water displaces, because it's much easier to, for the recipe to take water out at this stage than later on, say after we've put in the salt and pepper we want, etc. It's much easier to remove now than later. Perfect. And again, all you have to do is clean them. You don't need to cut any weird bits off of it, because this is going to cook for so long that any weird bits will be moved out. Please be careful when you're putting all of this into your pot. Again, these are going, look, right from the bag straight into the pot. All of this was boiling at one point, so be very careful as you're dropping things in. Some of the worst burns I've gotten in my life have happened over chicken soup. One was a curling iron, but that's a story. It's a story I'm saving for my memoirs, so we're not going to divulge anything right here, right now. Okay, and now we're going to get all of the aromatic stuff in here. We have leeks, onions, and garlic going in. Aaron just took a carrot out of here, but you know, I guess that's his payment for being my cameraman right now. So it looks like all of that is indeed going to fit into our pot. So let's now go back to the counter and we're going to cut up our last leek and the rest of our herbs. The thing about leeks is that they're dirty, dirty bitches. So we're going to cut off just the ends and just the tip, just for a second, just to see how it feels. And I'll show you what I mean by how dirty leeks are. Everything else we can kind of cut up haphazardly and it doesn't matter. Leeks, as soon as you bust them open, they are filthy on the inside. They all got all kind of sand and dirt and viscera inside them. They're really nasty. So they actually need to be cut individually and washed individually before going into our pot. The other leek I already did it with, but I wanted to be able to show you what it looks like inside a real leek. Leeks are, again, I think a really underutilized vegetable. They're sort of part of the onion family, or really the scallion family. And they have like the most mellow onion flavor. It's a really sophisticated kind of flavor. So look, we're just going to wash as thoroughly as humanly possible. Sorry that my sink is kind of a mess. My puppy is trying to eat out of the garbage can next to me, so that's exciting because that has raw chicken in it. Vashti, no. This is my new mug that I love. Chin up, tits out. It's a good motto. You know, we got the whole family home and we're cooking, and that's what coronavirus has turned us all into. We're the chefs for our families now, and hopefully you have as appreciative eaters as I do in my family, because while this is not a complicated recipe, Vashti, she got what she wanted. While this is not a complicated recipe, it is a physically demanding recipe. And so hopefully you're shown lots of love and affection when you cook this dish for your family at home. Putting the rest of the leeks into the pot, dropping a little along the way. If Vashti wants to eat it and get a nasty surprise at what a leek tastes like raw, she's welcome to. I love to cook leeks with fish. I think that since they're so subtly flavored, it really lends itself to adding an interesting oniony taste to fish without overpowering fish. It's a great thing to be able to use. Okay, so we're taking all of our dill, and the long stuff we'll just kind of spread in half. All of our dill, which is two bunches of dill and one bunch of flat leaf Italian parsley, and we're throwing it into as I step on my dog, we're throwing it all into the pot. Again, being very careful not to burn ourselves in the process. Now, I know that this looks outrageously full. I promise you it cooks down relatively quickly. And now what's left to do is put in our salt and pepper. Obviously, this is a very, very large pot, and so our it's going to look like a lot of salt, but we're flavoring a lot of soup. And salt is a flavor enhancer, so go crazy. You can always add a little water to the soup. And then our pepper, I mean, if I had to say in tablespoons what this is, I would say it's probably 3 tablespoons of kosher salt and maybe 1 tablespoon of black pepper. You're just going to kind of go until your arm muscles feel sad inside. Okay, so I think that's pretty good on the black pepper front, and we're going to mix all of it in slowly and carefully so that we don't burn ourselves. And really what I'm trying to do every time I mix is to just get things to change location in the pot as much as I possibly can. This is a recipe that requires a lot of patience, and so, you know, be slow and purposeful in your movements. If it doesn't all move now, it will later. So now we're going to cover it up, which is in my sink. We're covering this up, and we're going to let this cook on a kind of medium boil. You want to get it back up to boiling temperature. We're going to cook this on a medium boil for 3 hours, and we're going to stir it roughly every 30 minutes for 3 hours. And it already smells freaking fantastic, like fresh Bubby's homemade chicken soup in here, and it's been on the oven for like a few seconds, so it's about to smell crazy in here. And for anyone with pets at home, my dog, who's typically terrified of cooking and who is currently eating out of my garbage can, the only thing she's not afraid of when I cook is chicken soup, because when I give her little pieces of chicken out of here, she thinks I'm like her biggest fan, which I am, but it makes her terribly happy to smell chicken soup cooking because she knows there's something good in it for her. So thank you very much for watching me make my chicken soup. We're going to get back together tomorrow in order to separate out the stock from the soup, and I'll teach you how to do that once this baby is cooled. It's 11:30 in the evening right now, and I'm going to cook this for about 3 hours. Whenever I wake up to pee in the middle of the night kind of thing, I'm going to turn it off, let it sit on the stove and get cooler so that we can handle it in the morning. So that's a good little trick for you. Although I will say, when you let chicken soup cook overnight, everybody has kind of really weird dreams because of the smells going on in the house. So beware. See you soon. So we are back with our completely cooked chicken stock. This cooked for 3 hours last night, stirring every 30 minutes or so until it was done, and then I turned off the flame and kept it covered on the stove to cool so that it was easy to handle today. I know it sounds strange to leave something out overnight so that it can cool off. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. It takes that long for something this size to cool. It's been cooling now for many, many hours, and it is still warm, but it does make it easier to handle today. So I'm going to show you how we separate out soup and stock from what we cooked yesterday. So remember, we added all kinds of, well, let me tell you what you need first. You're going to need a colander, a bowl to catch any of the really good stock broth, a bowl to collect everything that you're going to want to keep for soup, like carrots and pieces of chicken, and then a bowl to be able to kind of move stuff out of the way, but that you want to be able to save for when we reboil everything, because you actually get 2 batches of stock out of what I cooked. It's so flavorful. So you want to start ladling everything that's in this pot out into your colander. And eventually you're just going to start pouring stuff in, but it's so heavy right now I can't even do that. Oh God, it smells so good in here. It smells like home, like Jewish holidays, like so heartwarming, and kind of like it's a very caring smell, fresh chicken soup. Okay, and so again, since we let it all cool and it is actually still warm, we're able to handle it very easily. So you're going to start separating out things that you want in your soup when you actually serve it. These really amazing pieces of chicken that have just been boiling away for hours in all of these flavors is exactly the kind of thing you want to be separating out. All of this white meat, just make sure that there's no bones in it. Really kind of go carefully through it, smush it a little between your fingers so that you know you're not accidentally giving anyone, we still do have, some of the bones have kind of disappeared, and the marrow of the bones are what makes the soup kind of medicinal, the old Jewish penicillin. There is actually some medicinal value in eating all of this bone marrow and all of the nutrients from the vegetables, but you don't want to actually accidentally swallow a bone. That would be bad. But don't even throw away the bones. You're going to leave them for when we get our second boil out of this. So you want to pull out any big pieces of meat that you can. And all of the fat and stuff that comes off of it, you can just throw it back into the bowl because it's going to go back into the soup for when we do our second boil. So these amazing pieces of chicken. Oh my God. It's so good. It's juicy, salty, tender, and it's so herbal from everything that we put in here. It's really just ridiculously good chicken. This would be great if you actually, there's a lot of different things that can be made out of what's in here, but I like to pull as much chicken out of this as possible so that I can make like a chicken salad later in the week, or use the chicken for lots of other dishes. I give some to my puppy. It's super plain. It's been cooked in, only what it's in, so it's not like it's seasoned with anything spicy or anything like that. So it's a great, like, tender tummy kind of food. All of our baby carrots that we used to flavor our stock, a bunch of them can now be saved for soup, so that when you serve this this broth and you reheat it and you make soup from it, you have all of these delicious carrots that have been chilling out and getting happy and soft and completely delicious and flavorful in your soup. So what we're going to do now is we're going to continue to separate all of these pieces from each other. And then we're going to toss everything back, everything else, everything that we didn't separate out, back into the pot, and I'll show you what we do with that next. Okay, so we're almost done separating out our chicken stock. I just want to show you, you want to kind of keep working your colander because it's going to get filled with chicken bits and leeks and dill and schmaltz and all kinds of other stuff. You're going to put the fat, the everything, the schmutzik all back into your pot. Our other schmutz bowl that we were working with, back into the pot also. Just throw it all back in. This round, it doesn't really matter, what's chicken, what's carrot, what's what. It's okay that all of it is completely smushed and mixed together, because this version is a very set it and forget it thing. This, we're truly making stock. Every single thing that's in here is going to be discarded now because we've already used what's good and yummy in the soup for our actual soup. So you have all this schmutz in the bottom of your pot, and we're now going to start refilling our pot with hot water. While we do that, I'm just going to finish storing my broth. Go through a lot of Tupperware with this project. And this keeps in the freezer for 6 months. I don't advise storing the chicken and carrots in with the stock. When you want to serve soup, you mix it together. But otherwise, this is perfect for when a recipe calls for some chicken stock. You now have chicken stock to use. So far we have these 2 containers going, but it looks like I still have more that I could use. Let's grab this container. And it's okay if you haven't drained it 1,000% from your colander, because again, we're making a second round of this. So nothing's going to waste. I mean, we're using every drop of everything. So that's the end of our first boil of our chicken stock. I'm going to cover this guy up for when I'm ready for the next round. And so what we're going to do to make our second boil is we're going to fill this pot almost completely, giving it room to be able to boil pretty furiously. The idea is that we're going to cook this for about an hour longer than we cooked our first round, because we want, since we've already kind of like used some of the flavors out of the soup, we want to really be able to let it get happy and still be just as flavorful as the first round of stock that we made. So here you see it's almost completely full. The cover is over there, so we're going to, here we go. Put it on the back burner because, like I said, this is a very set it and forget it kind of process. Putting it on a high flame just to bring it up to boil, cover on. As you go throughout the day, you will want to check it for seasoning. You're going to want to add some more salt and pepper to it. Probably not as much as you think, because even though this is a second round of boiling everything's already been seasoned, so you're using, in a way, more flavorful chicken and veggies than you were before. So tonight is the first night of Passover, and I'm going to be making matzo ball soup, but feel free to heat up any kinds of noodles that you like to go along with this. It serves beautifully, heat it up on stovetop or even in the microwave. And so this is our first round. Our second round is on the stove. We're going to cook that for 4 hours, stirring again every half hour. And when we're done, we're going to separate it simply by taking our big bowl with our colander in it, pouring the whole thing in there. Be careful not to spill. You're going to pour the whole thing in, lift up the colander, toss it, and what you have left is your chicken stock. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Cooking from Quarantine. Wishing everyone who's observing a Zis Pesach. Hope your matzo balls come out fluffy. If you're not observing, hope your noodles taste delicious with this soup. Thanks so much.